Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Here with us this evening is Lesley Williams. After her own transformative experience as a mindfulness-based stress reduction participant, Lesley has been passionate about teaching mindfulness to others. She teaches a variety of mindfulness-based programs in the areas of stress management, habit change, addiction, mental health, and mindful movement. In addition to being a mindfulness teacher, Lesley is also a nursing instructor. And as a nursing instructor, she has found great benefit in teaching mindfulness to students, offering them an opportunity to better care for themselves and their patients. I have had the joy and honor of co-facilitating the MBSR program with Lesley at the Center for Mindfulness at Jefferson in Philadelphia. I'm so happy, Lesley, to get this time to spend together to talk about mindfulness, habit change, and the ways that you continue to help others with mindfulness practices. So a great big welcome to you.
Well, thanks, and it's lovely to be with you. It's always lovely to be with you, Courtney, and thanks for that intro. Yeah, so it's great to be here, and congratulations on your podcast, your new endeavor. And maybe I can just start by telling folks what kind of brought me to mindfulness,
Yeah.
and I was really having some challenges with depression and anxiety. And somebody had suggested reading a book called The Mindful Way Through Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, what the heck? I felt a little desperate. So I read this
Yes.
book. And halfway through, I was kind of like, oh my goodness, I had this realization. I don't have to send myself down the rabbit hole. Like I have some agency, some control over, over my mind, over, where my thoughts can take me. And that was a wonderful awareness. And then, yeah,
Empowering is coming to mind. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then I took the MBSR class as a participant up at Lehigh, their Center for Mindfulness, and it's an 8-week course. Halfway through the course, we had been starting to learn about reactivity, how we can respond to situations, relate to them in a different way, really beginning to get connected with our bodies, which is, we have this wisdom in our bodies that oftentimes is so much stronger than, what we think the thinking brain is.
Yeah.
And, all to say, halfway through, and I get a call from my sister. And you know how when you get a call and something isn't right, it's just
Mm-hmm.
you get that, you get that feeling.
Yeah.
And she said, Leslie, she said, Jeff, who was my brother-in-law at the time, has died. And I immediately, it was so interesting because I immediately felt this reactivity in my body. Sorry about the motorcycle. Felt this kind of arousal, this reactivity, and I was able to just pause. And I was able to just kind of take a couple of breaths. And rather than going into my habitual, oh my God, what happened, da, 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 going on, I was able to, as I said, take a couple breaths and kind of regroup and ask her, how can I help you? How can I be supportive right now? And that was transformational to me. That was to have that actual in the moment of experience, that being present, being aware of what was going on in my body, gave me an opportunity to be different, relate to a real uncomfortable, heavy duty situation in a different way. And to be able to support my sister in a different way rather than adding not fuel to the fire, but
Yeah.
intensifying the situation, making that different. So,
That's
yeah,
just to, I mean, not only to be able to be with something that was so devastating, and to find ways to soothe yourself, but to also be able to be there for your sister, like to choose to be able to step out of reactivity with that pause, like creating that space to feel into the body, to notice what was coming up for you, and to find ways to support yourself, but to also respond in ways that were, I'm assuming, incredibly supportive for your sister, just by
Yeah.
being able to step out of your own reactivity and be more present for what she was dealing with.
Yeah, yeah. And supportive not only for my sister, but beginning by being supportive to myself and my
Right.
own nervous system. And then out of that place, being able to then, be available for her. And
Yeah.
that's one of the big gifts I have found with, mindfulness is this, the more I can be aware of my own experience and relate to it in a certain way, as I said, not reactively, I am in a better place to help offer others, even if it's just a presence of having a somewhat regulated nervous system,
Yeah.
it might be. And I find that with my students, oftentimes my nursing students, they'll be coming in for a test or whatever, and
Hmm.
they're all jacked up, and I'm so anxious and I'm so nervous. And, to
Yeah.
be able to be able to just take care of my own nervous system, have,
Yeah.
that's, and be really present for them in as far as, acknowledging that they're having this anxiety or whatever. It can be really settling. It can have, an effect on other folks.
I think
And
you mentioned like adding fuel to the fire we were talking about with regards to your sister, but I think that when something, whether it's like your nursing students, if they're really reactive, they're feeling stressed out about a test, it can change the whole environment of the room so that it feeds into how you are in the moment. So if we can calm the nervous system, then the same thing, like we can ripple out that sense of ease and calm in turn to others. So I think I've mentioned this in other episodes, but by us stepping out of reactivity and choosing how to respond, it changes the dance, so to speak. So it's it and what you shared about, I think I mentioned the empowerment, like to know that we have these inner resources to turn to with, like, in the snap of a finger, like you got that really terrible news, and to not have to run to get something to numb ourselves out, but like to turn inward to actually feel more into the body, and how can we use that in a more nurturing way towards ourselves and then towards others. So I think I'm a huge fan of Dan Harris, and he has a podcast, 10% Happier, and wrote the book 10% Happier. But I do really believe in what he said. He collaborated with a well-known mindfulness teacher, Sharon Salzberg, and has this little animated video that I often share with people when I have a workshop and talk about what mindfulness is. But he talks about mindfulness being a superpower. And in many ways, I feel like that sense of empowerment, it's something that's so, like, it's innate, it's here, but like we become so disconnected. But when we can come back into the body and have more of an embodied experience, like it feels like, it really does feel like a superpower. That's I had a similar sort of, my path to mindfulness was similar to yours, in that it wasn't so much, there was a touch of depression because of the challenges I had faced, but I had for a long time struggled with anxiety that stemmed in large part from the nature of the work that I do, but then some personal hurdles that I had. But it was even earlier than halfway through the program, it was like a few weeks in, to be able to pause and to deepen your awareness of just the stuff that we pump ourselves with, like where our minds go. And as you mentioned, to have the power, again, it's like a superpower, but to notice in that pause, maybe it's the negative self-talk, maybe it's we're so tightly wound, like to be aware of that, and then to know that we have the power to we can direct our attention where we want it to go. We can invite ourselves to let go of the negative self-talk. We can invite the muscles to relax. Like I think I'm convinced the superpower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a choice. I mean, it's amazing. We have a choice when we're present to our experience.
Yeah.
I think about, I think John Kabat-Zinn says, we have the opportunity to show up for our lives. We are showing up for our lives, and we're not turning away from it. As you said, we're not trying to escape from it, those kinds of things. But when in fact we turn towards it, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing with us how you came into mindfulness. So then how did you took the foundational, and I know people who've been listening to the podcast know the mindfulness-based stress reduction program is an 8-week, really the foundational program that was created by John Kabat-Zinn. But after completing that, how did you come about teaching it to others?
Well, halfway through, in my overzealous way that I am with so many things, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to teach this. I've got to, I'm
Yeah.
ready. And my very wise teachers at the time were kind of like, you don't have a practice. You need to go and meditate and practice so that you have something to share with others. Which
Yeah.
of course I was had a bit of a tizzy about, and then
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's do this.
I
And
actually have to do this stuff too.
right. So I took
Yeah.
my pillows and my cushions and all the goodies up to Omega, and did a retreat with John Kabat-Zinn, who oh my gosh, what a beautiful human being.
I didn't know you did. I didn't know this. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what was interesting also, and I'll try to keep it brief, was, I had, when I tell you I had pillows and cushions and props, I mean, I had the whole kit and caboodle. I had just about, like, I had my own space. And
Yeah.
halfway through, of course, the comparing mind, right? So I'm looking at all these people that have the right outfits on, that are sitting in stillness, that are just beautiful, that, oh my gosh, I'm kind of like, why am I here? Who am I fooling? The
Uh-huh.
story, right?
Yeah.
And and at one I can be quite dramatic at times also. And like at some point the tears are flowing, and when we had a break and I went up to John Kabat-Zinn, and I said to him, he looked up, and I said, can you tell me I'm going to be able to do this? And
Oh,
he sat me down right next to me, and never have I felt someone to be so present to me. I mean, it was like me and him in this room of 100 people. It was a break, so people weren't like, but he said to me, he said, do you know you're going to be okay?
oh,
And all of a sudden, there was this like profound realization that I can be okay. And it was such a gift, because he wasn't telling me, yeah, you can be okay, or, it's going to be all right, or do this, this, and this, but rather allowing me to really come to, notice what is it that's here, and to have that kind of awareness of, yeah, it can be okay. I can be okay. And I will be forever grateful for, again, his presence, and just, you know, his everything. So, yeah.
to have someone, just someone generally say that to you, let alone have John Kabat-Zinn be the one to plant that seed, like you're going to be okay. I mean, you can't put a price on that. But I didn't realize that you had been on a retreat with him. It was a dream of mine since I first learned of mindfulness through the MBSR program, and I get a chance to go also be at Omega last year, and it was like I was starstruck when I didn't have the easiest time going up to speak to him. I actually turned a corner and I was late because I went to the wrong. They have different buildings, where they hold the meditation sessions, and I'm really just like type A about getting somewhere on time. So I mapped out the whole place. I had never been to, no, I'm lying. I had been to Omega from one other retreat the year before with Loch Kelly, but it was housed down at a different like pavilion or building. So I thought John was going to be there, like that was the designated area. So then I'm looking and I watch. I'm like, he's not here. Where is it? So then I found out it was up the path, and as I'm hurrying there and I go to turn the corner, it was kind of getting dark. I literally turned the corner and walked into, standing right there was John and his son Will. And I couldn't get the words out clearly. I was starstruck. I stuttered a bit and said a couple of things that I was just like, what did I say? But couldn't be any nicer, couldn't be more humble, kind, and as you're saying, present, like just his full presence. So he's remarkable, and talk about a gift that is rippling out and the basis for all that we're doing together and beyond. So in addition to teaching, I know I mentioned I had the joy of co-teaching or co-facilitating the MBSR program with you at Jefferson. I know that you work with, or at least in the sense of the program that's taught by another remarkable teacher, and that's Judd Brewer. So I'm interested in hearing a little bit more or a lot more about what it is you do for Judd's program.
Yeah, great. Yeah, another phenomenal human being. And just very briefly, Dr. Judd Brewer is an addiction psychiatrist and also a neuroscientist, very steeped in research and evidence-based kind of teaching when and so anyway, just the short story of his his kind of road to meditation. He was in medical school, he was really stressed out, had panic attacks, and he somehow was introduced to meditation and really began to develop a practice, really. Kind of fast forward, he was interested in addiction psychiatry, as I said, and got into neuroscience. And well, before that, what kind of directed him into that was he began to come to understand how his kind of studies of Buddhist kind of teachings were very, very similar to the way addictions work, the way cravings work.
Yeah.
The either trying to reach towards grasping something that we want, that we think we should have, or kind of trying to run away or get away from things that whatever that might be, that we
I
find.
I can name a few of those that we
Oh
talked
yeah,
about.
yep. Let me get the list out, right?
Yeah.
So he has done a lot of research on this and has come to find out that when because of how the mind works, how the brain works, that it's beneficial to understand that in order to be able to work with the brain in changing behaviors, changing habits, rather than oftentimes the way we have tried to change bad behaviors or addictions, those kinds
Yeah.
of stuff by forcing or by willpower or
Right.
those, and rather he has designed this program that works with the brain. So it's a lot of using mindfulness, using awareness to come to understand how the brain works through, again, our own direct experience, rather than the knowledge of it, in order to, get to know how the brain works so we can work with the brain. And so, just very briefly, the way he kind of maps this out is that our brains are set up to learn. So from an evolutionary perspective, we again are, it's a survival thing. We
Yeah.
were either going towards things that helped us survive, whether that was food, whether it was shelter, other things to keep us safe in I'll say good things or positive beneficial things, or when we would come across something that was dangerous or harmful, stay away from that. So
Right.
it was this learning, find food, eat food,
Right.
remember where it was so we could repeat it.
Hmm.
Or, same thing. Oh, saber-toothed tiger, run away, remember where that is so I don't do that again.
And it's stored in the mind, like we associate good and bad, like go towards good, we want good, we want to get away from bad, run.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this context dependent memory we sometimes talk about. And so this is known as reward based learning. And it's very well, this is how we learn. And it has essentially three components. So there's a trigger, something that, initiates then a behavior. So a trigger, a behavior, and then a reward. And sometimes we say a result, but traditionally it's called a reward.
Okay.
And this is how we learn all behaviors. And so if we look at it, I'm going to again, from just the very basic, we see berries, we eat berries, berries are good,
Yeah.
remember where they are.
Right.
And, so just so the trigger is, eat berries,
Yeah.
the trigger is find berries, the behavior is eat the berries, and the reward is, that sustaining, kind of berries are good for you. There's benefit in that. And we remember where they are, and we just, that we'll call it a habit loop for trigger, behavior, reward.
And do it
If
again and again and again.
Yeah, yeah. And what's really interesting, and let's move on to kind of fast forward into where we are now, and
Yeah.
that's this same kind of process, and look at it in a couple of other ways, because it was a wonderful evolutionary kind of survival tactic, and thank goodness it worked, because here we are today.
Right.
But now with these days, it can be a whole different ballgame, because we have this plethora of food, not always very good. We have all of these other we have substances that we can that can be addictive. We have other we have pressures, work pressures. We have different there's just all these expectations and availability of things that when we look at them in habitual or in a habit way, can be not as beneficial.
Can
So,
I can I can I jump in for one
please,
second? Because something's coming
please.
up for me. It's like
Huh?
I say sometimes I go into mommy monster mode. Like that's like the things like, the socks, the inside out socks laying around and they're just dirty and they're just all piled up and like the wet towels on the floor. But the device usage, like, whether it's iPhones or iPads, is that a similar sort of like this reward based learning where there's a trigger? Maybe we feel like whether it's like the ding on the phone or the bing. I know you taught me this when we taught MBSR together, but the
Ding,
weapons
ding,
of mass,
ding.
yeah, the weapons of mass distraction that
Yeah.
I brought up on other episodes, but like there's that ding. It's almost like when they ring the bell for the dog, the Pavlov theory, right? Like something goes off, and the behavior, I guess, you look at the phone, and then maybe it's rewarding because you find out some great news. Maybe it's not rewarding. You see something disturbing, but it almost seems like the I know I see it for me too, like whether it's my work email or it's scrolling and checking out Hollywood gossip or looking at YouTube, like this impulse, it's very strong. and it's not always the most skillful. So what you're describing as the berry is like, to me, is like, that's healthy, that's nurturing, nourishing, that's positive. But I could see it's a slippery slope with what I've noticed increasingly so in the last 10 years with device use.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, that's what it is, spot on. So, and the tech companies, the food industries, they have perfected this this ability to kind of capture people's attention, to draw them in for all kinds of purposes that is not about supporting the well-being of individuals, right?
Right, right.
So when you talk about, even when you talk about that ping or ring, what ends up happening is when we look at that phone, or we're getting a little spritz of dopamine. And we all know what dopamine is. People think it's the feel good hormone, but it's really not, or neurotransmitter. What it is, it's a neurotransmitter that it helps to continue the behavior. So it's kind
Right.
of a driver of the repeating that behavior. And so again, even boredom, like, we cannot stand being bored anymore, right?
Yeah.
Two
Yeah.
seconds of not doing anything and the phone comes out, or
Yep.
whatever.
Yep.
And so uh even something like that, boredom can be a behavior, can be looked at in a habit loop. I'm feeling bored, I pull out the phone. And
Yep.
then the question is, with that behavior of pulling out that phone, what is the reward of doing that? So, and that's where we can, kind of start talking about how mindfulness can help us to recognize, first of all, recognize those habit loops, get some
Right.
clarity on, the trigger. And the trigger isn't all that important. What's really important is the behavior and the reward, because it's the reward that continues to drive the behavior. That's what happens when the brain feels that something is rewarding. That is what stimulates the continuation of that behavior. And every time we repeat that behavior, we're strengthening it. We're
Right.
conditioning ourselves more and more and more.
That's
So,
adding the fuel to the fire that really
yeah,
lights it up. So in terms of the awareness piece, which I think is huge, because that awareness piece, as you started off in this episode talking about, the awareness, the ability to recognize, to see, to pause before we follow through with the behavior. Is it the awareness piece, like after the trigger, that we become, like, the awareness is, I don't want to say it's most important, or is it like just the trigger itself, like being aware of what's triggering us? Like, where does the awareness piece, the meat of it, fall into
yeah.
that framework?
Yeah, another great question. It
I'm
can come
trying.
in, woo, it can come in anywhere.
Yeah.
So the point is that, so we are in these habits where mindlessly, right? We're doing it, we're doing it, we're doing it. And and we might say, oh my gosh, I don't want to, all I do is I spend hours and hours on the phone, and I know that it's not good. I'm missing out on
Right.
being with my family, da da da. So I've identified this as, something that I want to change. And
Uh-huh.
then it is a matter of starting to pay attention and using some of the tools of mindfulness, which includes connecting with the body. We talk about the body scan. So getting to know more about sensations and reactivity in the body. And so, to get back to your question, it can be in any point of that loop when we can kind of wake up, when we can be aware. It
Yeah.
gives us the opportunity to intervene or to collect more data. So this is like we're scientists in a laboratory, and we're collecting data. And one of the big gifts of mindfulness is the opportunity to kind of detach from all of the story and I'll say the craziness, but all of that goes on, And when we begin to practice meditation, we're better be able to separate ourselves from, oh yeah, here's a thought, here's the thinking, oh, I'm being judgmental, oh, isn't that
Yes.
interesting, here is, and so by stepping away from it a little bit, we come to realize I am not my thoughts. And when I realize that I am not my thoughts, again, I have a choice as to how I work with those thoughts. Or,
We don't have to buy into the inner dialogue, which when we're not paying attention, when we're not engaging the senses, when we're not directing attention into the body, like what are we feeling in the moment? We ride that train, that thought train, which I from experience, like most human beings, it's not always rosy. It can take us down the rabbit hole in a negative way, right? So
yeah,
so how powerful that can be, that we can at any point in that loop bring in
hmm,
the awareness piece, the mindfulness piece.
yeah.
So
So, oh, so go ahead.
no, you go ahead. I want to keep hearing more about this. What was coming up is we talked about the device usage, which to some maybe it's not as negative, and the berry is obviously positive, but one that I know comes up for friends and many people, like smoking or food addiction or drinking. Like, can you explain like how this psych that with the loop, like how the mindfulness or the awareness piece would come in to help somebody establish new, healthier habits?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And it's not a matter of substituting one habit loop for another or one healthier behavior for another. And so that sometimes we think the only way I can end an old or a bad habit is to replace it with a good habit. And that's not necessarily what the way to do things, but it can, finding things that we do like better than the old behaviors is something that, is beneficial. But okay, so let's talk about smoking. This is great. I'm actually on one of Judd's app. It's called Craving to Quit, and he developed this app to help folks to quit smoking using mindfulness. And actually, the research that he's done has shown that it's 2 times more effective than kind of the gold standard of regular quit programs. And so, anyway, what happens is what we ask people to do, what I'll ask somebody to do is I'll say, hey, don't stop smoking, keep smoking. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? My
Yeah.
health, my family hates it, blah, I came here to stop smoking. And what I say is there's a caveat to that. It is you need to smoke mindfully. So, meaning you need to pay full attention when you smoke a cigarette and notice what it's like. So don't be, having a cup of coffee when you're smoking, or don't be
Right.
driving, those kinds of things. And
Be with
sometimes,
it. Like really
yeah,
show up for the experience.
yeah, so that all you're doing is smoking. And oftentimes this is a process. So it takes a while because people will even forget. They went, oh my God, I went through the whole day and I didn't even think about, smoking a cigarette mindfully. So I'll have them like put a little note on their pack of cigarettes saying, smoke mindfully or something. We talk about these
Pay
mindful
attention.
cues, yeah, to kind of
Yeah.
break that autopilot.
Right.
So, what's really interesting is people will come back and they'll report things like, oh my God, it tasted awful. I felt like I just had, gross dirt and it was just in my mouth. And I noticed that when I was inhaling, I had this hot, kind of smoke, or the temperature, it burnt my throat. I got it, it made my eyes water afterwards. It was a little harder to catch my breath. And so what's happening is in real time, in their direct experience, people are noticing that, hey, this is not as rewarding as I once thought it was. Because you look back and oftentimes folks will start smoking when they're adolescents or something. They want to be cool, they want to fit in, they want to,
Right.
so they start smoking. Well, it you get addicted to cigarettes, right? And then you're
Right.
smoking because of you're drinking coffee or first thing in the morning, or oh, I'm feeling anxious. It's like, oh, and then I smoke a cigarette and I feel better. Half the time that's because you're starting to go in withdrawal, and what helps with withdrawal is smoking, getting that nicotine level back up. But
Right.
anyway, so the more people do this, and sometimes I just say, smoke and ask yourself, what am I getting from this puff? What am I getting from this puff? And
Mhm.
again, just building, we talked about that disenchantment,
Yeah.
and out of that disenchantment, so here is new information for your brain, and your brain is now recalibrating
Uh,
so that smoking is not as rewarding as it used to be, or how it thought it used to be.
So, like going back to what you said, you don't have to replace it with a healthy habit. Like it's you're getting intimate in a sense with the habit that you want to break. You're understanding sort of the role it plays, and when you can feel that the experience really doesn't have the reward that maybe you just out of habituality, like you just were doing it and just associating it with like helping you relax or taking
Yeah.
some of the edge off. But when you really show up for it and you really see how does it feel, what is it sort of like, what is it serving or offering, like, and you see it's not all that maybe you made it out or into be like,
Mhm.
it's not so I that helps me because I thought it was sort of replacing, like finding healthier habits to take over, but it's not, that's not the case here.
Yeah, because oftentimes, what do you hear? You say, "Oh, don't smoke, just have candy. Just have
Yeah.
candy, have something
Yeah.
else that, that you choose." And you're really not with that. So you're not smoking. You're not really replacing it with something that's a benefit
Right.
ultimately, but you're also not working with the reason that you are smoking in the first place. And so this is where we talk about, that showing up for my experience of turning towards what is this, behavior like in all of its manifestations. And in doing so, so oftentimes what happens is people will just naturally start cutting down on their smoking. But
Yeah.
the other thing is people, describe these cravings, there's just this desire, this strong pull to smoke that feels physical, and it's not always, because they're withdrawing from nicotine, but just this craving. And it's often just wanting, and this can happen with other behaviors. It's this discomfort that is what drives the behavior. I just don't want to feel this craving, this wanting, this discomfort, that when
Right.
I know I do this behavior, I'm going to get a temporary relief,
Right.
whatever it is. I'm going to get that quick fix, and then I get all the other poopy stuff, disenchanting stuff. But it is
Right.
worth it because for a minute or whatever, I feel
Right.
some relief. So what is really interesting then is to begin to teach people or have people experience through different mindfulness, tools or practices, or to be able to sit with the craving, the discomfort, and do this. Curiosity is major. I mean, talk about another superpower. Curiosity, whenever we bring curiosity, like the beginner's mind, or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
curiosity of a child, not the figure it out curiosity,
Right.
but I
But
bring
as
the,
if you have never experienced, like it's reminded me a bit when we guide student or participants in the MBSR program in mindful eating, where it's as if you've never, we typically use the raisin. It's as if you've never, we don't even tell them to refer to it as a raisin, but as if you've never seen this piece of food before, engaging all the senses to really show up for the experience with openness, curiosity, what we often refer to as beginner's mind. So how interesting that they're being asked to bring this beginner's mind, this curiosity to something that's this is uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, and
But
when we bring curiosity to anything, it changes like kind of the valence. It changes like when all of a sudden I can be like, ooh, well, that's interesting. It just
yeah,
changes it. It just does. It might be very little, subtle. It might be quite profound, but, and that's something to try. That's something to just see what that's like to get curious about anything, especially when you're not curious. When you can say, I'm going to be interested in not being interested.
yeah,
And even that is kind of like, oh. So anyway, but this idea of bringing this curiosity and acknowledging that, okay, right now I really want a cigarette, and I'm feeling tightness, and I'm feeling like even angry, and I don't like this feeling at all. And to be able to then say, okay, but I'm just going to try to pay attention. I'm just going to notice what I notice. And what ends up happening is just like everything else in life, it changes. So there might be that intensity, that discomfort, but when we continue to pay attention, what we notice is that craving, it kind of peaks,
right,
and it fades away, and it might do a little bit of this, and
right,
you might have all different kinds of maybe feeling different emotions or physical, or thoughts. But
yeah.
again, just saying, oh, okay, I'm noticing that. Oh, okay. Oh, I feel, it feels real tight here. And then it starts loosening up or whatever. And at the end of it, we can, it's like, wow, like I survived this. I thought I was going to die.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I thought my head was going to blow off.
I
And
can't wait one more minute without taking a smoke. Like I need a cigarette. But then if you're patient, if you're curious of the experience, and then you see that it shifts and changes, and then again, getting back to that empowerment, even if it's, I can imagine that if you break the pattern of just instinctively going for the cigarette and lighting it, when you can even take a few more minutes to pause and bring that sense of curiosity into what's arising, what's happening in the body, what am I telling myself, and how empowering little by little, the longer the stretches become to the point where you don't even crave the cigarette anymore.
and to say that it takes practice, right? We talk about everything takes practice. It
Yeah,
takes practice to get into a bad habit. We just aren't always aware that we're doing it, but every time we do it, we reinforce it and it
strengthen
gets
it.
stronger.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
same way with when we're trying to break a habit or we're trying to change something. And initially, change is incredibly difficult, right? Even if we're trying to change something that is it's not tied to it's not tied to emotional stuff, or something as simple as turn the toilet paper around in on
oh,
your thing and see what that's like for a few days. I mean,
oh, so it faces, that's another mommy monster
however,
moment. It's always the wrong.
just do that. That is, man, that is interesting
Yeah, yeah.
to try something like that. But anyway, I digress. But again, that keep on practicing. And as you said, so it's not that you're substituting something else, but rather when when you get through a craving or whatever, and you feel, holy cow, man, I did it, then really paying attention to how that feels in your body. Oh man, I am feeling expansive. I am feeling proud of myself, because that is an opportunity to now build enchantment. And this enchantment, again, we talk about oftentimes neurons that fire together, wire together.
Yeah,
So, what neurons do I want firing together? What are
right,
of benefit? What are not of benefit?
right. That's the whole neuroplasticity piece where, and I think it's the beauty of mindfulness, where it goes back to that control. Like we can use our minds to literally change the landscape or the structure of our brains in positive ways. So little by little, neuron by neuron, we can break free of these unhealthy habits, and again, like it it seems like the experience that you have in not having to follow that same pattern, that becomes the reward. So in some way, like that freeing experience in not having to go for the cigarette, like that in and of itself, that's a gigantic reward, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to also say that this is something that you need to continue to practice. We all because we can fall back into patterns,
I
right?
was
And
gonna say it's
so,
probably not linear, like we may
yeah,
regress, but then how much more we can learn from that and strengthen what it is we're working towards.
and I was thinking actually of another habit loop, or if I can ask you a question, or kind of come back to when you were talking about the socks inside out and the
Yeah,
the pile of clothes on the floor, and that being a trigger, right?
right,
So
right.
and then so can I ask you then, if we were trying to map that out, what would you say your behavior is when you're triggered like that? If you're comfortable saying anything,
Yeah, of
or
course. I bet you there's a lot of other moms out there who can relate to having your kids leave wet clothes and dirty socks everywhere. But so reactivity and usually tightness in the body, saying things that aren't the kindest to say, and feeling in the body and acting in ways that don't bring out the best in me. And then feeling regret, like feeling guilty for it afterwards.
yeah. So,
So,
the trigger is stuff around, which
yeah,
also can, which can also, I know for myself, kind of create this feeling of I'm not being disrespected here. I'm not being,
yeah,
maybe so as part of the also, part of a trigger or not, it doesn't, but then
yeah, for sure.
moving into that behavior, perhaps saying something that you don't want to say, yeah, as you said, that
Yeah,
reactivity, and
yeah,
then that result. So
yeah,
it's then that question, out of that behavior, out of that reactivity,
yeah.
what do you notice as a result? So you said regret, you know,
And it changes the dynamics. Usually, there's a different sort of flavor in the home. And when you have a chance to kind of look at the big picture, it's like, is this really the worst? Is this so bad? Like, it's not life or death. It's just something. Again, maybe it does go back. It's like I look at it as something being so little. Like, does it really take a lot of effort to turn the socks inside out or pick up it's not. It's not that much work. And so there might be the respect. Like, how many times have I asked them to do this, and they're not paying attention. They don't care. So yeah, it definitely changes the dynamic in the home. And if it's late at night, everyone goes to bed, then I lay in bed thinking like, that's not a great way to end, what was a great day. But yeah, it's just not a way that you want to feel in the body or the mind,
yeah,
personally.
yeah. So that awareness, first of all, that habit loop, right? So the
Yeah.
trigger, the behavior, the result of that. And then I mean, you've already spoken about when, when you're triggered, you notice like, reactive tightness, whatever those
Yeah.
physical feelings are,
Yeah.
which is awesome because that is where, developing, when we talk about developing body awareness, or that embodied experience.
Yeah.
So that would be a way, okay, I notice I'm triggered. I notice that I'm feeling that reactivity.
Yeah.
That could be a place where you then intervene. And when I mean intervene, it's like, oh, okay, I'm noticing that I'm getting revved up because the socks are on the floor again or whatever.
Yeah.
At this point, you have an opportunity to perhaps, take a couple breaths, notice that how important is this, whatever that might be, that can then change everything moving forward.
Yeah.
Or it may be that you have then said something that, oh, shucks, I didn't want to say that, whatever. And
Right.
recognizing that and then noticing again, oh, what did I get out of that? And saying, saying these, oh, I regret this. How does regret feel in my body? How does, oh, I'm laying in bed, and the mind's going, how is that? And in that respect, you are collecting disenchantment data because
Yeah.
this is not of benefit to you or to anybody else. And
And
so,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. No,
No,
no.
and as you're saying this, I can think of like one time, not one time. There's been a handful of times, but when you intentionally like you can recall those moments where you went berserk over the socks or the towels. And those moments when you made a joke about it, or you just picked it up and you threw it in the laundry, you didn't have to like make a comment, you didn't have to say something you're going to regret. When you can notice how it feels within the body, both the discomfort and then the, oh, I didn't have to go in that direction, and to feel what that's like, it it does, I think, promote or give you motivation to act in more skillful ways so that you're avoiding the unpleasant moments that maybe you wouldn't notice if you didn't take that pause and like have a moment to feel into what's arising. So again, not, socks, towels is not going to be the end of the world, but it's something that I notice that comes up. It's sort of like a habit, like, oh, here I go again. I'm getting reactive. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those little things that, oh, when I can notice that I'm getting triggered by the socks and I can break that momentum, then
Yeah.
I'm not as, I may not be as apt to, all right, the next thing that might happen, oh, they're not doing their homework or whatever, then that could build on that. Then that can, so we can see how there can be this, snowball effect that that can happen. And these habits, I mean, oftentimes once you start mapping them out or you're becoming familiar with them, they can be layered. So there may be all kinds of things that you begin to recognize, such as resistance or judgment or and and at the same time, it's just, again, when I'm aware of it, and I'm showing up for it, I have choice. And it's, also that being kind, being curious, bringing all of those qualities we talk about to the experience, in order to, which helps, helps us to make changes, respond. So,
Terrific.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
helpful. This is helpful. I
good.
had a misconception, which you so clearly explained for us, that you don't have to replace a bad habit with a good habit. It's just understanding, getting intimate with the habits that really don't serve us. And just by getting closer to it, feeling it, noticing what's coming up in the mind, we can really sort of free ourselves from those habits. So
Oh, and
it's,
even something like, we have habits of, we have like anxiety. Anxiety is a habit. You oftentimes don't think of anxiety as a habit, but, we may experience anxiety by, again, a gazillion things. And what do we often do when we feel anxious? So, a behavior that oftentimes is worry. We begin
right.
to worry and we worry. And there's something kind of, in a way, we can say sometimes it's, even though we may not be really clear on it, is what is the result? What's the reward of that? And in some ways, we can believe that we're accomplishing something because at least we're worrying. At
Right,
least
right.
and then that can trigger, that can trigger the loop around and around. So in order to work with that habit loop, again, there is, the anxiety and noticing what anxiety feels like in the body, and
Yeah,
noticing when the mind is starting to do catastrophizing or, projecting or whatever that might, oh,
yeah.
look at that. Look at that. You know,
Yeah, this is
I'm
hitting home
judging.
for me. This is,
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to talk with Courtney on this podcast. Who am I fooling? Da, 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 da. Oh,
yeah,
isn't that
yeah,
interesting, Leslie? Look what that mind's doing, you know?
yeah.
And in doing that, sometimes just the recognition kind of again breaks the momentum. So, and that curiosity, that interest, oh, I could take a few breaths. Oh, I could say, you know, whatever that is, you know, is this really true based on, yeah. So there's once again, with the recognition, with the awareness, opportunity to try other strategies, you know, to work with it, to work with it.
Thanks. This is really helpful. I feel like we could spend a whole episode just on anxiety as a habit. So maybe for round two with you, Lesley. But I know we're coming up on the hour mark. So I did want to share with listeners if they wanted to work with you or learn more from you in the program that's offered through Judd Brewer, how can they contact you or how can they learn more about that program?
Yeah, well, I'm more than happy to. I don't have a website, anything like that. So I would say just my email address, which is ljw313 at gmail.com. And I do coaching. I do have groups. And he has three apps actually. So there's the Craving to Quit, which is focused on smoking, quitting smoking, and also other addictions can be utilized in by that program. Eat Right Now, which we didn't even get into the whole food thing.
Yeah,
We,
that'll be episode three with you. So we have a whole lineup for
it's
listeners.
gonna be, oh my God, she's back. And you know, so Eat Right Now, our relationship with food, and then Unwinding Anxiety, which focuses on anxiety. So there's those three, and you can look up any of those, and you know, it will tell you about those programs. And was that it? Was that the and
Yeah, if
one other thing, Judd has a book that he has three books along the same lines as that. The latest is The Hunger Habit. That's about food, unwinding anxiety, and then The Craving Mind is the
crazy.
first book he came out with that talks about all different kinds of addictions. So yeah.
Super. And then, of course, if people are interested, you're one of the amazing instructors at the Center for Mindfulness at Jefferson. So you can always look up and learn more about the MBSR program if you're interested in taking that foundational mindfulness program. So, Lesley, thank you so much for your time together with me this evening and for sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge about habit and changing habits and how we can bring more mindfulness into our world, which really is much needed and a gift in so many ways. So thank you, Lesley.
And thank you, Courtney. It's been a real treat. Yeah.
Likewise. Take care. Take care, everyone.